Wow. Welcome, everyone. Welcome to the Forest Gene Conservation Association's American Beech Diseases Update. I'm Yarmila Betchka-Lee, and I'm a project manager with the FGCA. I am joining today from Mississauga, the Treaty 13A lands, and I'd like to acknowledge that the lands which constitute the present-day city of Mississauga as being part of the treaty and traditional territory of the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation, the Haudenosaunee Confederacy, the Huron-Wendat, and Wyandot nations. The FGCA is committed to respectful relationships and collaborative action in support of Indigenous knowledge, rights, and forest stewardship. So I would like to invite everyone, please, to take a moment and consider the lands that you are joining us from today. I would also like to thank the Invasive Species Centre and their supporting funder, the Ontario Ministry of Natural Resources, whose support has made this webinar possible today. So, officially, welcome to our American Beech Diseases 2026 update. We're so glad to see the diversity of people joining today to learn and to discuss the very real impacts of beech bark and beech leaf diseases. The FGCA Species Recovery Program has been working on the conservation and recovery of butternut and black ash for a number of years. But we're also well aware that there are other tree species that are impacted by invasive species, including American beech. So for the past year, we've been speaking with many of you, learning more about your concerns and experiences, challenges with management, but also the research and as well the great programming that's being implemented. We've also seen that there is great interest in this topic for both basic information and applied knowledge. So our intent with these webinars is to draw together experts, practitioners, and other key stakeholders to share the latest information and make connections. So without further ado, I am very pleased to hand you over to Kerry McLaven, CEO of FGCA.
Hey, thank you, Yarmila. And in addition to her hosting today's webinar, she has really been behind the scenes at the FGCA pulling all these conversations together. So yeah, thank you, Yarmila, for all your help doing that. Welcome to everyone, and a big thank you to our funder and all the individuals that we have connected with over the past year. This has really given us a true snapshot, I guess the tip of the iceberg in terms of the challenges that these two diseases have presented to the forests that we live, work, and recreate in. The conversations that we have had to date have sparked a fire in our little team, and we hope to continue this conversation over the coming year. And in the meantime, I'm going to give you a brief update as to where this fits within the FGCA's work. So I am Kerry McLaven, CEO of the FGCA. I get to talk about all these great things that our incredible team does on a day-to-day basis. So the FGCA works alongside of some of the brightest in the industry in research and in conservation. And we have a newly revised mission, a genetically diverse, resilient forest landscape that supports life and a healthy economy. Our mission is clear. We support partners, those delivering large programs and small across Ontario and Turtle Island to ensure that genetic diversity is maintained as the foundation of a resilient forest. We're not a public-facing organization, but a practitioner-focused one because of the depths that we get into in conversations like these when we know that people have a foundational understanding of healthy forests. So we do this all guided by a 5-year strategy. We can't just do this very long-term thinking work with a 1-year viewpoint. Our board and staff recently updated our 5-year strategy for the organization, recognizing the history of our roots in promoting source-identified high-quality seed, but modernizing it for a climate-conscious, action-driven practitioner. We're going to take long-standing recovery species recovery programs, and begin building strategies for reintroduction. So getting plants out into your hands and into the ground. And our work is always guided by research, collaboration, and of course, fiscal responsibility. We continue to do this work through our strategy, through our 4 primary pillars that have remained unchanged. They're still very relevant to today. We have a commitment to species recovery, like Yarmila was talking about with at-risk trees, as well as trees in peril. We support our partners in the Crown Forest, like sustainable forest license holders, tree nurseries, those operating large-scale programs, and private land and public land management, as well as urban forestry programs, to increase the volume of high-quality source-identified seed. And ensuring that climate change adaptation doesn't fit in a bucket, it is spread across and integrated across all our programming and initiatives. And almost more importantly, like today, is keeping the conversations around forest gene conservation and forest genetic resource management active, even under uncertain environmental, economic, and political times. So a lot of this project was really aimed at, supporting, our Crown Land Forest partners, because that's where we were hearing some of the greatest concerns of our members. And, we have really deepened our connection with Crown Forest partners in the past couple of years, improving shared understanding of forest genetic resource management in the Great Lakes St. Lawrence Forest region. And of course, improving collective knowledge is in our mandate. However, after a year of great conversations, so much more has been gained by our team. We opted to share the information more broadly, which is why you're here hopefully today, and why the recordings will be available to many folks afterwards. So why beech? Again, I don't need to explain how beech is involved in the forest you work in, but we do know it's a foundational late successional species. It is absolutely a key wildlife mass producer, which you'll hear a little bit about today, and even more so on the 11th if you're taking part in that one. It has very strong regeneration influence, influencing what is coming up on the forest floor. Obviously, as many tree species are, important for soil function, nutrient cycling. We've been informed that it's been used by First Nation communities for food, oil, medicine, ceremonial purposes, and much more. As well, because of all this, it has very high conservation priority, particularly in our area due to beech bark disease. So with this species, it's not at risk. We still have options. And so species recovery becomes more effective when we have more options available to us. It has greater adaptive potential due to environmental changes. That is, more individuals that possess traits suited to new and changing environments. Potentially reduced inbreeding depression when we have lots of individuals pollinating lots of individuals. There's potentially increased resistance potential. Genetically diverse populations are less susceptible to pathogens and diseases. And of course, while we have options, we have improved reproductive success and population stability. Greater genetic diversity leads to improved seed set, seed quality, and seedling survival overall. So enough on the genetics. We hope you enjoy what you hear today and on what you hear on March 11th. If you take part, we encourage it. If you or your organizations are not already a member of the FGCA, we encourage you to become one and hear more of this type of content. It is only $50 annually, and there's many benefits you can say here. We encourage you to reach out and become a member. And if at least you follow us on any of your social media platforms, that is where you get day-to-day or week-to-week updates on what our team is doing, really fun insights as well as practical information for practitioners. So with that, I'm going to hand it back to our hostess, Yarmila.
Thank you very much, Kerry. I'd like to introduce our first expert speaker today. I'm very pleased to welcome Mike Brienesse, who is a silviculture guide and policy advisor with the Ontario Ministry of Natural Resources and Forestry, based out of Sault Ste. Marie. Mike has worked for both government and industry in diverse roles, including forest operations, management planning, resource analysis, and policy development. Mike is trained as a forester, is an instructor with the province's Certified Tree Marker Program, and was coordinating author of the Boreal and Great Lakes Silviculture Guide. So over to you, Mike, and thank you.
Thanks very much. I'm just getting my screen up here. We tried this a moment ago and it worked just fine, of course.
Mm-hmm. Oh, it's coming.
Problem is I can't see it on my end.
So I think you have to share your presentation screen.
Ah, here we are.
There we go.
Thanks. Apologies for that. Yes, good afternoon. Really appreciate the opportunity to speak to some MNR Ministry of Natural Resources perspective. Necessarily, I'm going to be speaking to a lot of work from a lot of different people, and to just be able to touch on a number of different pieces as we go through. Happy to take questions afterward, and of course, can connect you with the right people if you have more detailed questions on any of the work that we're going to look at here. Give a bit of context first. We have a good cross-section of people, some familiar with Crown land management, some not. Talk about silviculture policy as it relates to beech bark disease, and then some efforts that MNR has been affiliated with or undertaking. So briefly, we have what we call the managed Crown forest. In the past, you might have heard of called the area of the undertaking. So that zone through the middle where Crown forestry, public forest is managed commercially. We divide those into forest management units for administrative purposes. We have, I believe, 43 management units averaging roughly 1 million hectares each. And in those zones is various different tenure arrangements. So we have sustainable forest license holders. Some of those are single entities. Some of those are cooperatives. Some of those are local forest management corporations. And of course, there's many overlapping interests, responsibilities on the landscape. So on the right-hand side, the Crown Land Use Policy Atlas, parks and protected areas and private land and all the complexities of the land. And of course, overlapping treaties, land claims, and all the processes unfolding with Indigenous communities and our developing relationship. In central Ontario, fair bit of beech occurrence, so over 500,000 hectares of Crown managed forest where we have at least 10% beech. So a significant component of the forest and a significant challenge as beech bark has been unfolding. Of course, we've been aware of beech bark disease for a long time, but we've had, by some descriptions, our head in the sand until recently, or in the last decade or so. Certainly seen it in Eastern Canada. We have people coming in, foresters are often mobile, asking us what we're doing about beech bark disease even in the 90s, and most of the foresters here kind of looking at each other, what do you mean? There's no problem. It's been a shock for some. It's been maybe not a case study in the best approach to responding, but we'll go through a bit of that in terms of what have we done, what could we do better perhaps, we'll get to in the questions as well. So we know beech bark disease is a challenge from an overstory perspective. We're losing mature trees, we're losing the mass production, we're not fulfilling the growth in the stands that we would expect from a silviculture perspective, but particularly have this, what some refer to regeneration bomb, or the beech thickets, beech hills. Dealing with this reality of regeneration is one of the biggest struggles I think we're at right now. But just to set the stage again a bit more, so we have our foundation legislation, the Crown Forest Sustainability Act sets up most of what we do in the managed Crown Forest. Large, healthy, diverse forests are kind of our goal, sustainable management by balancing all the objectives. And that unfolds through forest management plans. So for every forest management unit, we have to write a forest management plan. It's the responsibility of the sustainable forest license holder to do that. It's done by interdisciplinary teams from forest industry, MNR, stakeholders, Indigenous communities that are adjacent or within the unit. That process is, and our forest policy framework is really predicated on local decision making. So there's a lot of latitude to adjust based on the local desire, what kind of desired forest and benefits are the people involved looking for. We do, of course, have some policies, so forest management guides being the most applicable here, that bounds some of what's possible, provides some steering direction to that. I'll speak a little bit more about some of the guides. So we write a forest management plan. The forest management plan speaks to our strategic goal, it speaks to the activities, harvest, renewal, tending, roads, etc., that are consistent with it getting to that goal. For every stand, we develop a forest operations prescription. So this is the silviculture prescription for those stands of how these forests will be managed, specific objective for that stand, fitting into the bigger picture, what activities will happen, how you manage the variability within the stand. Those forest operations prescriptions are developed by a competent registered professional forester. It's an important point here, just go over some of the roles. So the Ministry of Natural Resources does not manage the forest directly. They're managed by the Sustainable Forest license holders on MNR's behalf. The forest management plan includes all of the strategic silviculture options and what we call silviculture ground rules, sets up essentially the permissible activities on the forest. The forest operation prescription has to be consistent with the plan, but the FOP for any given stand is not approved by MNR. So the entity managing the forest is deciding case by case, block by block, what is the right prescription for that stand. MNR and through auditing and other processes, we track at a cumulative scale. Are the individual decisions adding up and making sense? Or is performance of the silviculture, regeneration, overstory management, and so on, tracking as we'd expect and so on. But the real decision making on how to manage block by block is done by the forest manager. Of course, I have a tree marking program. So for more partial harvest systems, we're using tree markers on the ground, making individual cut and leave decisions tree by tree. There's a certified tree marker program in Ontario to provide a minimum competency and some accountability to the people that do that work. The forest manager is responsible for managing the forest. We have 2 trust funds that deal with some of the financials. So the Forest Renewal Trust, you can think of as a performance bond. So there's a per cubic meter harvested set stumpage that's paid into the renewal trust, and the forest manager then draws that out when they're doing the regeneration that's required. The values are set based on the expected harvest volume, the expected silviculture work needed over the next period of time. Forestry Futures Trust is another trust, but it's more of a for all forests to draw from, so it's not specific to an individual forest management unit. And it's for specific purposes in terms of dealing with natural disturbances, enhanced silviculture, and a number of other specified purposes. So for each cubic meter harvested, a small amount is paid into the renewal trust, and then forest managers can propose projects and receive that funding if they're approved. In terms of forest management guides, the most applicable here to beech bark disease and managing that on the landscape will be the silviculture guide. The silviculture guide, though, important to note, is it's information and direction, but it's largely enabling. So we're laying out some very broad direction in terms of what is likely or not likely to work, but almost anything can happen on an individual site. The guide itself goes into some detail in terms of suggested management approaches, how you'd approach a prescription, but does not prescribe a lot of the detail. We trust and rely on the local decision maker, the person with the local context and competency to make the right decisions towards their objectives. So, for example, the guide might say that single tree selection is consistent with an objective of managing for beech, but it wouldn't say in a directional point of view in terms of, thou shalt do this, exactly what basal area you manage down to or how you would manage your size distribution and so on. There's, of course, best management practices, so the suggested approaches and the collective wisdom we tried to document of this is normally how it's managed, but the local forest manager makes those final decisions and are accountable for them. So there's a series of standards for regeneration, for management of the overstory that have to be met to demonstrate that the forest is tracking as they've claimed it well in the forest management plan. There's a few other pieces of the guide. silviculture systems, kind of the broad definitions of them. So one of the challenges we see with beech bark disease losing the overstory is that some areas are no longer having sufficient stocking or sufficient basal area growth to support selection management, and we're switching to shelterwood. And there is a brief commentary in the guide on beech bark disease, but it's a 2015 guide. Our practice has evolved a fair bit, our understanding has evolved a fair bit. So it's still informative, but each forest manager is taking it much further than the guide has. It lays out in there some of the context for ideas like what we refer to as the advancing front, the killing front, and the aftermath. So different zones of how the disease is progressing, how you might best respond from a silviculture point of view. Also at play here is the stand and site guide. So wildlife tree direction, for example, so 10 mass trees per hectare required to be left behind in the harvest areas. So beech, of course, being an important mass tree, oak and others as well if they're present. And then direction for areas of concern. So what we refer to as a zone around different values. It might be some of the regular forest values like streams and stick nest, it might be specific human values. What are modified practices, if any practices are allowed in those zones? So just pause to make a point on both the impact of areas of concern. They can be significant in terms of how much of a stand you would operate for harvest, as well as the interspersion of private land. So some of the context here is that we're only managing a very small portion of the land base in any given year or any given 10-year forest management plan. And what we can do to respond to beech bark disease through a forest management plan is limited, at least in part, by that. It's also a landscape guide that directs composition and structure, so things like how much forest of different types you should have over time, how much tolerant hardwood, how much even and uneven aged, and so on, to trend towards a natural condition. So a list here of some efforts, actions MNR has undertaken or been involved with. And if you're not familiar with Crown land management, this might sound impressive, the list, but I want to be careful to point out that I think our stakeholders, our clients, on average would say MNR has not done enough, not nearly enough in terms of coordination of efforts, in terms of funding. There's some very dedicated people doing great work, and as much as we can with the resources we have. Sometimes politics and personalities get in the way. So I'll go through this list. I think it's still some good accomplishments, but I don't want to oversell what we've been able to do so far. So forest health monitoring, of course, ongoing. This has been going on for decades. It's been different partnerships with the federal government and provincial government, different roles. See Dan Rowlandson's on the call, coordinates that program. Sharon Reed will speak to how some of these fit into a detection, a mapping of spread, and so on. The bolded ones here I'll speak to briefly afterwards in a couple slides. So some survival plots around beech bark disease progression. Our science and research branch developed a primer and management recommendations early in, or we would consider early in, the status and the progression of beech bark disease in Ontario. As I mentioned, the silviculture guide has best management practices and commentary, so trying to provide managers with a starting point for how to deal with this. A number of our sustainable forest license holders or forest managers have been pushing us, particularly Westwind was pushing MNR, rightfully so, from the beginning here. And one of the responses to that was holding this international conference, so I'll speak to that briefly in a moment. We have a number of Forestry Futures Trust projects that have been initiated to try to address the regeneration. So trying basal bark treatments, using brush saws, stump treatments, hack and squirt, all sorts of different things. And SRB, Science and Research Branch, some monitoring associated with that. And I'll speak to one of the results in a paper that came out of that from Eric Searle, Cleo Yitagetsu, and others. We've been implementing salvage rates for stumpage in some cases. So it's a Crown resource, it's a public resource. To harvest that resource, you have to pay a stumpage, a certain fee per cubic meter to the consolidated revenue of the province. And when there's a salvage, it's a reduced rate that you have to pay, recognizing the lower value for the thing that's being harvested. When we're developing forest management plans, we run forest estate models, and we've had to work on a number of assumptions, trying to understand the forest dynamics, the growth and yield impacts of beech bark disease, on how the forest will trend over time, how it will grow back, what the fate is of some of these stands that have modest or high beech components. We commissioned a state of practice document in 2018, so recognizing each forest manager's practice was evolving. Some were kind of going with status quo, others were being more aggressive in terms of how they modified their practices. Tried to capture at that point in time what different people were doing and sharing that across forest managers, so at least there was an awareness, get people talking. So that was both overstory management and regeneration. Briefly on that, I'm not prepared to talk about what each SFL is doing. That's better for them to speak to it themselves. But broadly speaking, I believe most managers now, if there's 20% beech component in the overstory, they are switching from selection to shelterwood. If that stand would have otherwise qualified as selection, I believe one forest down to 10% now. Of course, the distribution of the beech matters, how clumpy it is, what size classes it's in, and so on. But beech essentially being treated as unacceptable growing stock and preferentially removed where it's being managed. We have our tree marker certification program, as I mentioned. To stay certified, you have to take a refresher course every 5 years. And we've included beech bark disease as a component of that refresher course, including the field trip, Barry Davidson from Westwind supporting that. And in 2023, held a regeneration workshop looking at some of the work from M&R Science and Research Branch, Halliburton Forest, and others. So fairly early as we started to notice beech bark disease impacting forests, Richard Wilson and others, when we had a provincial forest pathologist, installed some plots here just trying to understand. And so here you're seeing a progression of the green being high vigor trees and the red being low vigor trees or dead, and a very quick transition in these cases. So North Real Lake Road is roughly east of Perry Sound, or more specifically between Dorset and Baysville. Very quickly, these stands declining and trees dying, snapping off. And a contrast with what I understand we see in southern Ontario, and a number of people attributing that to the acidic soils on the shield, lack of calcareousness, slower growth rates, and some factors we probably still don't fully understand. But the idea of once scale is there, and we're presuming we have a starting point with these plots. We can't say for sure that there wasn't scale there in previous years, but once scale shows up, a very quick decline and very large impact in terms of percent of the beech in the stand that's being affected. As I mentioned, we hosted this international conference of sorts. So it was hosted in part by the Invasive Species Center. Richard Wilson and a few other people were really the driving forces behind it. Brought together practitioners and researchers from Ontario, Quebec, and 4 US states. So Quebec and Ontario, especially the Ottawa region, at a similar state of trying to understand what's coming at us, how to respond, and some of the US states providing context of how they've been managing this for decades or even a century, up to a century in some cases. So the fellows on the right there, Ralph Nyland, you may remember if you have training in forestry, author of silviculture textbook really, and into its 3rd edition. Dave Houston, the kind of granddaddy of beech bark disease research. So the first couple are from Ralph, Kill the Beech, Shoot the Deer, Manage Your Late, or The Only Good Beech is a Dead Beech, just a perspective he was sharing at the workshop. But really the ones that stand out to me, the middle one's from a fellow from Michigan there, of we're fooling ourselves essentially. We are where they were 20 years ago, and it's as much bigger impact than we think it is. It's going to fundamentally change your forests. I think we're starting to realize that, maybe not fully realizing though, as this is still unfolding in some parts of central Ontario. And the last one, if I recall correctly, was from Dave Houston, that it's not really a pathology problem. And we'd like more information about all sorts of things, but really this is about a management problem, managing the landscape, managing politics, and managing funds, and what kind of forest do we want, what kind of forest are we willing to accept, and what are we willing to do to influence that. Mentioned as well the regeneration workshop in 2023. So research from Eric Searle from M&R, Adam Gorgolowski from Halliburton Forest, and other collaborators. They went through, I'll briefly look at one of the publications from Eric and his group. What have we been doing on regeneration, a roundtable discussion with the SFLs and other practitioners from some private land consultants. What's been tried, what's been working, what are the growth and yield implications? And We were happy to have Sharon Reed there as well, which I believe is on the agenda today, providing an introduction to folks at that time of beech leaf disease. So one of the outputs of Eric Searle's shop was this 2025 paper on looking at different beech regeneration control treatments. So in this case, on the French Severn Forest and Bancroft-Minden Forest, they had 3 tending treatments, a control basal bark with triclopyr and brush saw, and 2 harvest treatments. One was 5 years after a selection, individual tree selection harvest, and one was concurrent with shelterwood harvest. Don't have time to get into all the details, just trying to give you a bit of a pointing thing to point at here in terms of the link to the paper is in the description. If you can't find it, please email me. Eric's email is here. But the snapshot of their results really is, it seems brush saw is not terribly effective, particularly in the short term, or sorry, in the long term. You can expect to have to do multiple treatments. It can buy you perhaps a season of more light. Basal bark can be effective. There's some challenges and some best practices for how to do that well. But in both cases, we're not just looking at the regeneration problem of beech, but really the goal is to recruit regeneration of other species, particularly sugar maple, but ideally red oak and all sorts of other associates. And one additional thing we've been kind of hearing anecdotally and people have been observing, and Eric and the team documented here, is we're not seeing strong recruitment of maple and other species. So while we're making more light available, more resources available in short or medium term with basal bark and brush saw, we're not seeing strong recruitment of other species. So something that's still we're unfolding in terms of understanding, but a significant concern. I should also say that while beech bark disease has really presented a challenge with the regeneration, the proliferation of beech is not new and not just starting with beech bark disease. We've anecdotally, and it's well documented as well, we've been seeing a significant increase in beech in our regeneration layer over the last several decades. It's been responding well to our management practices, and it's very likely we will be up against a beech regeneration problem, in quotes, I suppose, whether beech bark disease progress as it has or not. It certainly accelerated the need to address it, but we have seen both an increase in beech and a reduction in maple over time. A few selected resources here. So the link to Eric's and company's paper there is the third one. I'll also point out Westwind has I'm mentioning Westwind, all the other SFLs have been busy on beech bark disease as well, with forestry research projects and trying their best to manage towards their objectives. The document from Westwind has on their site, I believe but not certain, Develop a Forest Ontario, includes this table, and it's a really quick, concise pros and cons of different regeneration control methods, including basal bark and brush saw and hack and squirt and stump treatments and so on. And a few other resources, if you're like videos as opposed to paper sources or text sources. The last one there is from the Ontario Woodlot Association on their YouTube channel, a lunch and learn on related to beech bark disease. That's what I was hoping to share today. Happy to take questions.
Thank you very much, Mike. That was great. I do have one question that's come up in the chat from Stephen Smith, and he's asking, are we concerned that the forests will become virtual monocultures of sugar maple, assuming it regenerates to fill the space eventually? No maple regeneration is a concern, of course. Is also a concern, of course.
Yeah, that would be a concerning outcome for sure. So when we developed our landscape guide, like our composition targets, we tried to do our best to understand the historic condition, and there has been kind of a mapleification of the Great Lakes St. Lawrence in central Ontario through colonization and agriculture and everything else. I don't know that it's a significant risk. We see a lot of other species come through with the maple. We have specific tree marking approaches to try to encourage other species. Some of those desirable, yellow birch and red oak and cherry and so on. Some of those undesirable and hard to manage, even red maple and ironwood and all the other associates. So yeah, it certainly would be a concern. I don't personally see it as a high risk, but something we watch for.
Okay, thank you. One other question here from Megan Clay. Do you have some preliminary idea why regeneration of other species are not becoming established? Why other species aren't becoming established?
Um, I don't have a great handle on it. I know maybe I'll put Eric on the spot. Eric Stills, our Great Lakes St. Lawrence um, silviculture research forester. He's been thinking about this a lot more, thinking about how to approach it, document it, understand it better. Eric, if you don't mind.
Yeah, sure. So, speaking to sugar maple specifically, the decline in abundance of sugar maple regeneration has been noted across the northern temperate hardwoods. There's a really good paper out in May 25 from NRCan looking at Ontario, Quebec, and New Brunswick, and not just in stands with a beech component, but in across all conditions that sugar maple exists, the relative abundance is declining. Likely that's due to a mix of local factors. I saw in the chat someone said deer, like deer browsing absolutely can be a pressure. That's generally locally specific. We have some high ungulate areas of high ungulate populations in the province and some areas without them. Acid deposition, further acidifying our soils is a concern. Competition from beech as well, and summer droughts. Yeah, there's a number of different angles and something that we're hoping to be able to dig a little bit more into in the next few years. I will say for species other than maple, it's challenging for them to colonize into single tree selection harvests or generally undisturbed forests. But as Mike said, there's been an uptake of some of the other practices to be able to start promoting those other species in our managed forests.
Much better said than I could, Eric. Thanks.
Yarmila, you're on mute.
Thank you. I apologize. I was just asking if there are any other questions. Feel free to pop them into the chat. We will also have an opportunity to have more discussion at the end of the presentations once you've had a chance to hear all of the other presentations. Okay, I see one more question coming in. Okay. Are there regions in Ontario with greater than 10% beech density without scale present?
Yeah, I think there's still some places where you'll find clean beech. They're getting fewer and fewer. It's on St. Joseph Island, south of Sault Ste. Marie. Last year, I looked at some trees by Espanola or north of Espanola that didn't have it. Some parts of Nipissing it's still progressing into. Some parts of Algonquin Forest, it's still moving through. So it depends where you are. Depends probably on some terrain and geography effects too. But they're smaller and smaller each year. So the probability of scale coming and very likely the fungus being introduced as well for any given tree is very, very high. So when we think on a 20, 25 year or more selection cutting cycle, very likely a tree you leave now will not be a beech tree you leave now will not be standing. So we're modifying our practices because of that.
There's a note in the chat. A couple of places in Toronto with scale on beech, but no scale on others close by. So no beech bark disease on some of the scale trees, which is promising.
Yeah, there's one other point I forgot to make. I'm here from people is so early on we've heard the notion of kind of 1 to 5% resistance or tolerance to beech bark disease, and my understanding is on the crown on on the shield, on the granitic soils. So far, we're seeing numbers way, way below that. Much fewer trees showing up, and seemingly no way to predict which ones will be the potential survivors in advance.
Okay, I have another question that's just popped up. Are there any more aggressive methods being trialed other than hack and squirt or brush saw?
I'm going to defer to Eric again, if that's okay, Eric. You've got a better cross-section of what people have been trying.
Yeah, sure. I guess it depends on what you mean by more aggressive. I mean, there's certainly SFLs now, and I don't want to speak for Halliburton, but I think this is the case as well, where it's essentially, they're attempting complete removal of beech from the stand. So prioritizing beech in the harvest, and then also going in and doing tending afterwards. It's certainly effectively what happened at the Shelterwood site that Mike was referring to in Bancroft Minden, where beech was preferentially removed during the harvest. There's very little overstory beech, if any, left in our tended plots, and then they were tended afterwards.
Okay, I think we're going to move on to our next speaker. So thank you again very much, Mike, for your presentation. And yes, if we don't capture everyone's comments or questions right now, then we can follow up with the speakers at the end of the presentations, or follow up individually later after the end of the webinar. So our next speaker is Dave Carey, who is a tree improvement specialist with the USDA Forest Service Northern Research Station. Dave's technical expertise in tree research ranges from grafting, cell culture, and micropropagation to DNA marker analysis, including construction genetic linkage maps of American beech. His research focus is on host resistance to invasive pests and pathogens, and has included research on Dutch elm disease, emerald ash borer, and beech bark disease. Dave earned his MSc in microbiology from the Ohio State University. So over to you, Dave.
Thank you. All right, so we're going to go in a completely different direction from let's get all the beech out of our stands to what could we do if we really want beech in our stands. I'm going to see if this will actually do that. All right, can you see the whole slideshow here?
Yes, looks great.
All right. So science is a team effort. So I work with Dr. Jennifer Cook. She's the research lead at our station in Delaware, Ohio. And so one of the reasons you might want beech on the landscape is because it's a great mass producer in places where, there are no other mass producers growing. So it's basically a wildlife tree. And it is cold hardy as well, as you all probably know. Now, there's a beech bark disease is a causal complex. There's an invasive scale insect called Cryptococcus fagisuca. It's the thing that causes the waxy buildup on the trees, and it creates sort of niches within the bark for Neonectaria fungi to take root, and they create cankers, and if they can coalesce and girdle the tree. And this is the fungus is what really kills the tree, but without the insect, the trees tend to be relatively healthy. And it takes, 5-ish years from first incidence of fungus to really get a big killing wave, and it can kill 50 to 80% of the stand. This is a picture taken within a stand that we were working in Ludington, Michigan, where we're doing some of our tree breeding. And what you're left with is a lot of damaged trees and unhealthy trees, and it is very unfortunate. And the beech bombs, yeah, that happens too. I usually call them thickets, but beech bomb, I kind of like that phrase. That's kind of cool. So there is some good news, though, that there are some symptom-free trees that exist and stands that are long affected by the beech bark disease complex. The Houston brothers figured out that the resistance appears to be to the scale insect. Down here on the left, this is the scale there is 1 millimeter. If you can't see it, it's a little bit dark. So these scale insects are really, really small, but they create some damage, and there's little fissures that the fungus can get access to the bark. And the crawlers, they have a life stage where they lay eggs, and the eggs hatch, and they get these little tiny crawler phase. But they're super small, and their legs are super, super small. And so they're not really effective crawlers. Most of the dispersal is through that wax, and the eggs being laid in that wax, and the wax dispersing around. So genetic variation is the basis for tree improvement. Now, American beech is an obligate outcrosser with the heterozygosity of like 1.8 or something like that, super, super diverse. And these natural stands have lots of genetic diversity. But it's the sort of in a situation where you've got an invasive species, there can be rare alleles in that population that can confer resistance or tolerance. And sort of they're rare because until you get that disease pressure, there's really no selective advantage for those alleles. And so if you have a stand with a heavy beech pressure and you see some clear trees, there may be an opportunity there. And so when we think about breeding for resistance, first thing is you need to identify resistant germplasm, and there are different ways to do that. You're right, you can't really look at a stand that isn't impacted and say, yeah, that's my tree. We're not there yet, although we would love to be there at some point. But you do want to preserve, propagate resistant germplasm. You need to be able to phenotype these and verify that what you think is resistance actually is durable and is something that you can see over time. And you want to validate that resistance is something that's a genetic component so that it can be heritable, and you can actually, if you're talking about breeding for resistance, it needs to be heritable, or you gotta just start over completely. And finally, if you do everything right, you can breed and deploy resistant trees back onto the landscape. Step one, well, we're going to skip step one and go straight to step two, I guess, which is cross-pollinations. This is a place in Ludington State Park, Michigan. And early when Jennifer and I started working on beech bark disease in like 2000, 2001, we were pointed to this stand because it was, accessible to our lab. It was within driving distance, but then they had heavy disease pressure. They were concerned about hazard trees as well. And we were getting into it before the killing front, but while beech scale was really, really heavy. And when beech scale is super heavy, these clear trees really stand out. And we were able to identify some of those. And then, oh my gosh, it's a mast year, it's a crossing year. And so we were rushing around to figure out, okay, how are we going to get into the canopies of these trees? How are we going to do these crosses? Okay, well, how do you deal with beech pollen? I mean, what are the handling protocols and that sort of thing? So lots of phone calls and lots of consultation and making pollination bags out of Tyvek. And it was a fun time, but it did work. And we did get, what do I have, seedlings? We did get seedlings. Whoa, no, that's not. We did get seedlings out of it. So it was exciting. When things work the first time, it's really, really cool. So once you get seedlings, you do need to be able to find out whether or not the progeny, in order to really figure out inheritance, figure out the progeny have resistance as well. And so we developed this, or modified this artificial inoculation technique, first developed by the Houston brothers, grandfathers of beech bark disease research, right? Where you collect eggs from an infested tree at exactly the right time of year. Timing is important here. And you want to separate the eggs from everything else and put those eggs on some little open cell foam so that when the eggs hatch, those crawlers crawl out of that foam and onto the tree. And we're doing these all outside. And so we're protecting our foam from getting waterlogged by using little Tyvek TPs. We had the Tyvek on hand from the pollination bags, of course, so why not use it? And what you see a year later is a variation, a plethora of phenotypes, right? We have super highly susceptible trees. We have some trees that aren't able to sustain any scale infestation. And then we have some susceptible, the majority of them susceptible trees. Oh no, I can't see this picture. There we go. I'm going to move you. And so on the bottom right here is what you might see on the inside of that pad. When you take that pad off, you've got adult scale, we're taking this a year later, so they've already gone through the reproductive phase. You got scale eggs, and you've got potentially some nymphs as well. And when you breed in a susceptible tree by a susceptible tree, what you get are susceptible progeny. When you breed a resistant tree by a resistant tree, you get about 50% of the progeny being resistant, which is kind of a big deal in a first generation. And even though you maybe have a family with a high proportion of resistance, you're still going to get susceptible trees out the other end. So even if you're doing a breeding program, hey, I have all these resistant beech in one place, we're just going to go for it and we're going to be perfect. You're not going to be perfect. You're going to be 50 times, 100 times, 500 times better than if you're not doing any breeding, but you're still going to get susceptible trees out the other end. Once again, science is a team sport, and we have relied on a lot of state partners and national forest partners to collect sign for us and potentially grow rootstock and actually do tests out in the field to confirm whether or not they see it. They say, hey, I have this clear tree. Do you want cyan? It's like, well, probably, but let's test it and make sure. So there's a field test that you can do to kind of force the issue and make sure that the tree that you think is really resistant to beech scale is actually resistant to beech scale. So if there's trees that are resistant, we're going to collect cyan. We're going to propagate them by grafting. This is a hot callus grafting technique that folks have used for lots of different species. We adapted it for beech. Beech does not like to be bare rooted. So these are all container grown trees in this fancy-ish grafting setup here. But it really did increase our take rates by a drastic amount. So it's kind of worth the effort for us, at least from a research perspective. When you're grafting big tree from mature trees like that, those grafts that first year can flower and you can create crosses on those trees in a year, which is really, really cool. It saves going up and down, up and down, up and down in a boom lift, trying to bag these trees out in the open. So it's a huge increase in efficiency in a way, I guess. All right, now I'm going to have to move everybody again. Move over here. So beech seedlings benefit from live soil. Well, beech in general is a horticultural pain in the butt. They like to die on you if you don't do it just right. So you need live soil. Water molds are a big problem. When you're out planting them, consider mycorrhizae, consider where you're planting them and that sort of thing. Ambrosia beetles can be a problem as well. So, it's not just beech bark disease that we're fighting here. Oh man, I gotta move y'all again. So from doing a lot of test crosses, we found that about 50% of the progeny are resistant to beech bark disease if you have two resistant parents. And this family here that I've boxed is a reciprocal cross with about 100 progeny at the other end. And that's being used by Mitchell Calvin and Jeremy Johnson at Michigan State to do QTL mapping as part of a graduate work. So that's kind of fun, and that's kind of new. So as far as updates go, that's new information. So what have we learned? We've confirmed that scale resistance is inheritable. We know that resistance can increase their breeding. We know that about 50% of the progeny, when both parents are resistant. And this is a fine enough basis for a breeding program and for actually establishing seed orchards. So if you put resistant trees in one place, you're going to get good seed out the other end. And so if you're thinking about, okay, well, where do I find resistant trees? They are not evenly distributed throughout the landscape. They are in clusters. These are actually, that's not what this picture is showing, but in general, this is true. Talking to Dave Houston, he's like, man, you can go for days and days and days and not find a clear tree. And then all of a sudden you find 10 of them, which is actually an indication that it's heritable. So think about that. But you want to focus on places where there's a lot of beech to begin with. That way you're target rich as well. And you want to find stands that are heavily impacted by the beech scale. And you want to look for trees with super healthy crowns. Look up, always look up. Sometimes you find a clear tree, and it's because it's dead, and beech scale doesn't live on dead trees. And we're looking for relatively large trees because we want them to be potential parents as well. So we want them old enough to be able to breed. And we want them to lack all insect and disease symptoms, not just that they're scale free, but they're also canker free, because scale can be ephemeral, but those cankers last a long time. So if you have a tree that's free of scale and is cankered up, I would skip it. Also new, the state of New Hampshire is looking to save their beech bark disease resistant trees in order to preserve those genes in light of beech leaf disease. So there is even in the States, there's some renewed resistance for looking for beech bark disease resistance. So we had this original plan of establishing regional seed orchards for beech, so that folks can have the option of planting beech bark disease resistant progeny when and if they find a place for them, right? And we suffered from some unfortunate turns of events, that the place that we were doing our resistance screening in Cleveland, Ohio, is this black star here, was where the epicenter of beech leaf disease was. I mean, not specifically at Holden, but in that area. And so unfortunately, we were unknowingly potentially spreading beech leaf disease into different areas to establish these orchards. And so we put a halt to these, and there were trees that were removed, and it was kind of tragic, but unnecessary thing to do. But the black stars are where we currently do have resistant beech on the land, in the ground, either as orchards or as progeny plantings. And this gold star here is me in Delaware, Ohio. All right, so this is a picture of what the beech scale resistant orchard in Michigan looks like. Right as of 2024, we got Paul Blasey and Jeremy Johnson giving a tour. Now these trees are not as big as I would expect them to be after being in the ground for about 10 years, but they're most of them are still thriving, so that's good news. And this winter, I called the forest manager up and said, "Hey, can you give me a shot of this planting?" And so this is from just a couple of days ago. This is what this looks like. So of course it's winter time, so not super interesting, but the trees are still there, and some of them are getting pretty big, so that's encouraging. Some of them not. We're gonna have to look at that, because really what you want is a lot of genetic diversity as well as just resistance, right? This is our beech archive in Delaware, Ohio. So yeah, you can grow beech and it can look nice. And this is a beech seedling planting at Holden Arboretum. This was established in about 2010, maybe something like that, 2009, 2010. Some of our original cross progeny. Now, since this is Cleveland, these are beech leaf disease infested trees now. And so these trees are, instead of being used for beech bark disease resistance, are being used for beech leaf disease research. So, can you see my cursor? Maybe not. Well, the guy in the light colored hat,
yep, we
in
can.
the middle here, not the one that's staring at us, but is profiled, is David Burke, and he's a researcher at Holden Arboretum, and they're working on some beech leaf disease research there. A few of the trees appear to be much more tolerant of beech leaf disease than others, and they have some data to show that at least one of these appears to be somewhat resistant to beech leaf disease. So that's kind of exciting. You might have one tree with resistance to both. Imagine the math in that. So I was thinking about where I would go from here, personally. And you can always select, graft, and create seed orchards, as I had described here. One thing I would potentially do differently is focus on those F2 orchards early, because of delayed grafting compatibility. You could potentially collect seed from resistant trees if you can, prove that they're resistant on the forest. You're going to have to test a whole bunch of them to find resistant progeny, though, because you never know what's pollinating that tree. You could keep resistant trees alive in situ, removing them and removing susceptible alleles over time. I mean, that's one possibility. But keeping beech leaf disease in mind, open grown trees do better with beech leaf disease from what I hear. So establishing plantings may end up being a better long-term approach to keep these things alive. We were able to plant some resistant trees back into Ludington State Park, and that was super gratifying. Where we had started doing our crosses, many years ago. So, and most of these trees are still alive from what I understand, 60, 70% survival rate. This is just a fun picture. This is vanity. During COVID, we were still trying to work, and I was quarantined because I had symptoms. And so we were supposed to be doing this, collecting phenotypes from these last resistant trees for this QTL mapping project. And so they destructively sampled for a number of different reasons and just put them on my porch. And so I had some fun doing some science in my basement. And so this is kind of what I was scoring here. This is what a biomass might look like in your basement. Okay. So I was talking about that linkage map. We use that linkage map. I was talking about linkage maps, but we're using these cross progenies to generate linkage maps, sort of a cartoon of the beech genome. And using the associated phenotypes with those trees to figure out where within the genome there might be genes for resistance. And so that's what those little stars are representing from a couple of different families. And the other thing that's new is that Dr. Jill Weggeson in her lab at University of Connecticut has assembled an annotated beech genome, and we're hoping to use that to kind of make more sense of the QTLs and the GWAS markers that we've found. And we're hoping to ball that all up into one sort of publishable unit. That's our current goal anyway. All right, my cartoon isn't working. Whoa, no. So I'm going to go back. I know this isn't the best way to look at this, but yeah, we've had lots of help from lots of different partners and lots of different funding sources over the years. And I'm available for questions either now or online.
Wonderful. Thank you very much, David. You've definitely, your information has elicited a great amount of interest on the FGCA team. So I have to say, so we have, again, I just invite everyone to put your questions in the chat, and we do have one for you. So if you were to collect a bunch of seed from trees in a resistant seed orchard, would you spread the seed in the understory of a stand, or would you produce seedlings and plant them? Which would be more effective?
Well, my instinct would be to plant seedlings because if you're going to put the seed in the understory, who knows what's going to eat them before they have a chance to germinate. But it might be a situation where it depends on how much seed you got. I mean, if you've got bushels and bushels and bushels of seed and you can take an 80% hit by casting seed out there, then that's virtually free, right? Versus growing them. So I guess it just depends on how precious they are to you.
Okay. Thank you. So another question is very exciting to see this work being done. Wondering if you could share how long this breeding program spanned.
Yeah, we did our first cross in that bucket truck picture was 2002. And we kind of phased out working on beech bark disease heavily when we started playing around with emerald ash borer. So I would say 2002, we had a planting of resistant grafts in 2010. So, but then we kind of phased out beech bark disease research in a big way in 2016, 2018, something like that.
Thank you.
And at least wet work,
Yeah.
let's put it that way.
Sorry.
Oh, I mean, wet work, especially the handling trees and doing resistance bioassays and that sort of thing. I mean, it really tapered off after 2016. But we're still dealing with data and folks that are interested in the genetics of it all.
Great. Okay. Thank you. Any other questions? I have one that deals with the suckering of beech. Yeah, are you monitoring suckering beech at all? Are the suckers getting to reproductive age? Are they producing flowers or seed? Or are they being infected before they reach this stage?
I don't get out much. So I am not personally monitoring beech suckering in stands. So I saw a picture from Mike where there was a root sprout that had little burrs on it. I thought that was really interesting. So I suppose they do. I would imagine my instinct is that if we're going to get root suckers, that they're going to be juvenile, right? And it's going to take them quite a while to be of reproductive age. That would be my instinct, but I can easily be talked out of that if people have experience otherwise.
Awesome. Thank you. Okay, here's another question for you. What are your thoughts on the approach for deploying this resistant material for effective wild integration?
What are my thoughts on it? Sounds like a lot of work. Honestly, that's my initial thought. I think generating resistant seed is proving to be a little more difficult than I originally would have thought. These grafted resistant trees are, I think really what you need to do is focus on site and fertility and really get these trees happy and healthy in order for them to produce a lot of seed. So maybe if it's a focus, you can make it happen. But planting and forgetting is maybe not the best idea. Site selection is probably going to be key as well to get beech to be really happy and healthy and thriving. But if you really want beech on the landscape, planting seedlings, I think, is a fine idea.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions for Dave? Okay. Well, if you think of some more, we can pick them up at the end. For now, I will say thank you very much, Dave, and we'll move on to our next speaker. So we have Madison Sturba joining us next. She is the terrestrial invasives team lead at the Invasive Species Center, where she oversees a variety of projects, such as training program and beech leaf disease monitoring network. Madison graduated from the University of Windsor with an MSc in biology and an honors BSc in behavior, cognition, and neuroscience. So welcome, Madison.
Awesome. Thanks so much. Just confirming you can see my screen okay?
Yes, thank you.
Awesome. Okay, thanks. Happy to be here. My focus today will be on beech leaf disease, just the basics that everybody knows, what it looks like, what it is, that sort of thing. Also talk about our community science program that we have, just in case you want to get involved. And then Sharon will talk more about the updates and research of it all. So I'm with the Invasive Species Center, and just in case you aren't familiar with us, we are a not-for-profit organization that mobilizes action against invasive species that harm the environment, economy, and society. We're based in Sault Ste. Marie, Ontario, so we have a lot of staff there, but we also have quite a few people like myself working remotely across the province. And we do the majority of our work here in Ontario, just since that's where we're based, but we do have a national focus as well and work with partners all over the country. So beech leaf disease, it is suspected to be caused by an invasive nematode that feeds on beech leaf tissue. These nematodes are microscopic worm-like organisms, and this is what they look like. Super tiny. The nematode that causes beech leaf disease is thought to be a subspecies of Lycanthus cornete, which is native to Japan. The nematode does cause similar banding patterns on Japanese beech, but since it's a native pest there, it doesn't cause the same sort of damage. Beech in North America don't have any natural defenses that could protect themselves against the nematode since they didn't co-evolve together here in the same area. Beech leaf disease is found in forests with American beech, which is the only native beech species we have in North America, but it can also infect plantings of European, Oriental, and Chinese beech. Nematode feeding can cause leaf deformity in beech trees of all ages, but young understory trees do get disproportionately affected by beech leaf disease, and they can die as a direct result from the disease within 2 to 7 years of initial infection. So this map shows the distribution of beech leaf disease based on the most up-to-date surveys in the US and Canada. So the disease was initially detected in Lake County, Ohio in 2012, which we can see in that pale yellow color. And then since then, it's spread quite a bit and can now be detected in about 15 states. So it spans from Michigan down south into North Carolina with this new detection as of last year, and then up over into Maine as well. Beech leaf disease was found a few years later here in Ontario for the first time. So in 2017, it was confirmed in Elgin, Norfolk counties in this blue color here, and then it has spread since. Everything in green on this map to the right shows the native range of beech trees in North America. So we can kind of compare where it's at right now versus where it could go. And it's definitely not everywhere across the range yet, but it does have the potential to keep spreading further. Here we can zoom into Ontario specifically. So beech leaf disease has spread throughout southern Ontario with new detections every year since its discovery. Last year in 2025, it has moved into 3 new counties. So right now, the furthest known edge of the disease is the Peterborough, Prince Edward County area. So how are nematodes infecting beech and moving this quickly across the landscape? Nematode invade beech buds from the midsummer into autumn, where they feed and overwinter. They'll feed on the bud tissue, damaging the leaves on a cellular level, and then that damage is evident in early spring as leaves emerge fully symptomatic. So as soon as the leaves start to pop out here in the spring, you'll know whether or not it has beech leaf disease. How do the nematodes spread? Likely moving with help of rain, wind, and potentially arthropods like caterpillars. Human activity can also play a role, especially in the long distance spread. That's kind of just the case for other invasive species in general. And here, one example would be the movement of infected plant material like nursery stock. So how do we identify beech leaf disease? The most distinctive feature of beech leaf disease are these dark stripes or bands between the veins of the leaves. The bands can range in color from dark green to yellow to a deep red or brown. The intensity of the banding really depends on how long that tree has been infected, so how many nematodes are present. These pictures here are taken from understory trees in Barrie. They're newly infected trees, so that banding is really just starting, and it can be harder sometimes to spot while you're walking by, especially if you're not really looking for it. The bands can be easier to see if you hold them up to, if you hold the leaf up to a light source, so like the sun if you're outside. And we'll see how beech leaf disease looks over time, but as the disease progresses, we'll see changes in leaf texture and leaf curling. We'll also see a decline in bud production and leaf retention. So the disease is a little more progressed here in these pictures compared to the previous slide. So you can see those bands much more clearly here, and just notice how the person taking these pictures is holding those leaves up to the light just to get a better idea of what those bands look like. These trees have been infected with beech leaf disease even longer than the ones in the previous photos. So in the photo on the far left, you can see the curling and changes in leaf texture that's associated with severe infestation. So the bands are kind of raised, look a little leathery to the touch. That's pretty common when the disease is more progressed. And then I mentioned earlier how the bands can differ in color. So we can see here in the middle and the right photos that the bands are more reddish brown here on the European beech. This picture here shows a badly diseased beech with a second flush of undersized but healthy leaves. So sometimes infested trees will have a second flush of leaves, but these leaves tend to be smaller and unevenly produced through the canopy. The tree's really just trying hard to survive, trying to produce more energy, get some more stores saved up, but these doesn't really work and the leaves tend to become reinfected at some point. So we've seen a lot of variation in how beech leaf disease can look, but one thing I want to point out is that this symptom progression we're seeing here is not over the course of a single growing season. It's actually over the course of several years as those nematode populations increase. So as more and more nematodes are present over the years, there'll be more and more feeding in the buds, and then more obvious symptoms appearing each subsequent spring. This is one study that actually looked at beech leaf disease symptoms at the start and end of the single growing season, and they confirmed that beech leaf disease symptoms are apparent at bud break and they don't progress throughout that single season. This is just one figure from the article, but you can see with the arrows here that are pointing to the bands, that the bands remain relatively the same at the start and end of the growing season. There's some general wear and tear on the leaves at the end, but the bands themselves look pretty much the same. So it kind of shows that leaf damage is happening sometime prior to bud break in the bud itself. All of these bands and symptoms you're seeing can be explained by changes at the cellular level. So if you look on the right-hand side, it's a normal uninfected beech leaf. Sorry, on the left, the cells look relatively organized. It's a nice cell wall, cell structure. But on the right-hand side, you can see a leaf coming from a tree infected with beech leaf disease. And there's just absolute chaos. There's way more cell layers there than there should be. So this does kind of increase the cell thickness and size because beech leaf disease does cause an abnormal rate of cellular division. Because of all those new cell layers, we do tend to see an increase in leaf swelling. And I thought that the swelling can make it easier for nematodes to feed, just gives them better access to the cells. These thicker leaves on the symptomatic trees are linked to decline in photosynthesis. So this means that the trees have a really hard time producing enough energy to maintain its growth. And those understory beech saplings already have enough that they need to kind of manage in order to grow. So for example, they have less stored energy because they're smaller. There's more competition for resources on the forest floor. So these types of factors mixed with the stress from beech leaf disease can really lead to the rapid decline and mortality of smaller beech. Identifying beech leaf disease can be tricky sometimes because trees can be affected by more than one thing at once. So this is a picture we see here. It has beech leaf disease and anthracnose, which is it's a common lookalike for beech leaf disease, but there are some ways to tell it apart. So in this picture here, the leaves have banding and curling like what we would expect to see with beech leaf disease. But you can kind of see anthracnose, it has these brown spots. It does cause leaf discoloration, but those brown spots can cross over the veins of the leaves. You won't see that with beech leaf disease. The vein tissue is too thick for the nematodes to cross, so that's just something to keep in mind. This is another lookalike, just to kind of be aware of. It's beech leaf curl aphid. It can cause similar banding patterns. It causes puckering and curling. But what can kind of help you tell it apart is when you look on the underside of the leaves. When the aphids molt to get bigger, they leave behind what's called these cast skins. So you can see that in the right-hand picture. All those darker spots are evidence of this aphid, so you won't really see that associated with beech leaf disease. Just something to think about if you're out and about looking for beech leaf disease. Beech leaf disease is a relatively new disease on the landscape. It's been here for about 9 years, which seems like, a long time, but it's really not when you compare it to other species like emerald ash borer, which has been here for 20-ish years, or Dutch elm disease that's been here for 80 years. So because beech leaf disease is so new, there's still a lot of ongoing research to better understand how we can prevent its spread here in Canada and what works most efficiently. So right now we have some general recommendations that can help protect beech, and hopefully with more time and more research, we can kind of refine our suggestions. But the first thing you can kind of do is to clean your boots when leaving an area with beech, especially if if you've seen symptomatic trees there. Just use a boot brush and give your shoes a little cleaning to help prevent the spread of the nematode. Boot brushing is a good practice in general for invasive species because it can help prevent the spread of other things like invasive plant seeds. The other recommendation we have is to not move materials that could be contaminated with the nematode. So don't move beech seedlings, leaf litter, firewood, that sort of thing. It can move on nursery stock, so any beech stock should be carefully examined before you purchase and plant. There is one treatment option available here in Canada now for the use against beech leaf disease. The Pest Management Regulatory Agency, or PMRA, approved the emergency use of Arbortech 20S, which is a fungicide and nematicide. It has already been used here as a fungicide in the management of Dutch elm disease, and it can now be used to treat beech leaf disease. It's a product that's injected into the symptomatic trees by professionals every 2 years. Right now, the emergency registration is in effect until July 3rd of this year. So hopefully we're able to extend that label and keep this as a possibility when treating beech. Our biggest call to action right now is to report any beech leaf disease that you find. Even if you come across a lookalike and you aren't totally sure, just report it anyway and it can be verified by experts. There are a few different ways to report, but one of the ways we recommend is through EDMAPS, which hopefully you've heard of, but if not, it stands for the Early Detection Distribution Mapping System. It's a tool exclusively for reporting invasive species. They have a website, you can go to on your computer, or an app. The app makes it really easy to report, especially when adding in like location details. So if you don't know EDMAPS, it's a completely free tool to use. It produces these distribution maps, and it can really help identify leading edges of a disease, support rapid response efforts, support research, that sort of thing. So these are what the maps look like. These are public reports. This is a map specifically for beech leaf disease that I grabbed this morning. So it's not an exhaustive list of everywhere beech leaf disease is found in Ontario or across North America, but it's a good start. And the more people that use this platform, the more accurate the maps become too. Reporting invasives is really important. Community scientists and people working in the field are often the first ones to discover new invasives and make those first reports. So while you're out about in your neighborhood or while you're at work, pay attention to the beech around you and see if you notice any signs of beech leaf disease. The more people that are looking for it means the more chances we have at early detection. And early detection can lead to rapid responses. In this case specifically too, it's really helpful for research to help us better understand the spread of the disease and how it's moving across Ontario. Because there's still so much to learn with beech leaf disease, we did start a beech leaf disease monitoring network we run in coordination with M&R. One of the biggest goals of this network is to provide volunteers with training and resources to build capacity for beech leaf disease identification and reporting. So ultimately, the goal is to have all these reports of beech leaf disease and help Ontario scientists in learning more about the spread dynamics. We do have a call for volunteers going out really soon, so we'll be encouraging everybody to report beech leaf disease. And then once those reports are confirmed through EDMAPS, we'll be asking people to send in symptomatic leaves. We would provide you with everything you would need to participate. So if you're interested, you can scan the QR code, check out our website to learn more. You can also reach out to me directly and I will help get you involved. If you want to learn more about beech leaf disease or other invasive species, feel free to check out our website. We have species profiles, fact sheets, best management practices, newsletters, and much more. We also have a monthly webinar series where we invite experts to come and talk about anything related to invasive species, research, issues, management, things like that. Our next speaker, Sharon, was actually a guest on that webinar series. And she talked about beech leaf disease. So if you're interested, you can check that out too. If you ever go to our website and see resources that are missing, if you have any ideas for new tools that might be helpful when you're out and about or when you're working, let us know. And we're always interested to help out, always interested in learning what else we can do and what else we can develop. So that's it for me. If there's time for questions, I can take them. If not, I'll be here at the end, so can answer them then. I can also put my email in the chat and people can follow up with me later if they want.
Awesome. Thank you very much, Madison. That was great. We do have some questions for you. First one is related to the leaves that are symptomatic. And the question is, any idea of what is causing the thicker cell layers mechanistically? So
that's a good question. I feel like I might have to defer to Sharon if she happens to know. I don't think I personally know. how it happens at the cellular level.
Yeah.
I just know that's the outcome.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. Yeah, I maybe Sharon will address this in her presentation. Okay, so a few more questions here. Where do the nematodes overwinter? On fallen leaves? Or are they susceptible to cold winter temperatures?
They overwinter in the buds, and that's
Okay.
where they're causing the damage. And then you'll see that damage in the spring.
Okay. And one other question here is any info on phosphite, not phosphate, fungicide/immune system activators effective in managing beech leaf disease or symptoms?
There aren't any, it's not available here in Canada. I think in the States they've tested different products like that. But we only have the one control option here.
Okay. Thank you. Oh, okay. Is Arbortect only effective on trees in the early stages?
Yeah, I can pop the link to the label in the chat to make it easier too. But yeah, you have to apply it when there's already symptoms, and you can only use it on trees that I believe are bigger than 13 centimeters in diameter. So there are some restrictions in how it's used. And it does provide 2 years of protection.
Okay. All right. Thank you. And okay, so a quick follow-up on the nematodes. Are they susceptible to cold winter temperatures? Can that limit the range of the disease?
That's another really good question. And I'm kind of blanking on temperature right now, any kind of temperature boundaries. Sharon also might have a better idea of how to answer that one. So I might have to defer that one to her as well.
Okay. Perfect. Thank you. And yes, if you would like to share the link to the beech leaf monitoring network with us, then feel free to pop it in the chat, but we can also send it out to everyone later.
Thanks.
Okay. Thank you very much, Madison. It is time to move on to our next presenter, who, as you mentioned, is Sharon. And so while she's getting ready, I'll share a little bit about her with you. Dr. Sharon Reid is the Forest Health Research Scientist for the Ontario Ministry of Natural Resources. The Forest Health Program is focused on developing management, improving detection, and assessing the impact of destructive forest insects and diseases. Since 2018, Sharon has led research to identify the cause of beech leaf disease and how the nematode is spread. In addition, program staff regularly monitor plots in southern Ontario to assess the impact of the disease on Ontario forests. In addition to investigating beech leaf disease, the Forest Health Research Program is performing research for the development of eDNA monitoring, prevention, and management guidelines for oak wilt. So over to you, Sharon.
All right. Are you able to see my screen?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, great. All right, well, thank you very much. So today I am going to share a research update with you on beech leaf disease. This is research that's being done in Ontario, and like the earlier speaker said, science isn't done alone. So I've been working with Eric Searle and Karen Gingras on the monitoring plot network, and with Endurance Aware, Daniel Martin, Cameron McIntyre on the arthropod vectoring project that I'll talk about. So I'm going to talk a little bit about symptom development. If you missed some of what Madison was saying, I'll be repeating a little bit of that. And then I'll talk about the impact of the disease in southern Ontario, nematode transmission, and then I'll give you a few wrap-up remarks. Got a little too crazy there. Okay. So the disease was first detected in Ohio in 2012, just across the lake from where we first confirmed it in Ontario in 2017, which was Elgin and Norfolk counties, and has rapidly developed, the symptoms have rapidly developed across Ontario, now from Essex to Simcoe to Prince Edward County. And we've seen this similar rapid spread in the states from Michigan to North Carolina to Maine. And the disease is caused by an invasive nematode in the buds and leaves. The main symptoms are the leaf banding. Severely affected leaves can get a yellowish color to the bands on the top. There's often necrosis as leaves also become, damaged leaves become infected with other diseases too, like anthracnose. And all of this can result in early leaf drop starting as early as late June. So the nematode feeding, so these are these plant pathogenic nematodes. They have this needle-like mouth part that they can insert into the cells. And this type of nematode has chemicals that it produces that it inserts into the cells, and it changes the cellular processes of the leaves. So I think that might answer one of the questions. So that's what causes this cell disorganization as the cells, they change the amount of replication, and there's more chloroplasts and more cell layers, creating the perfect little feeding center for these nematodes. All of these changes at the cellular level lead to changes in leaf physiology, changing carbon assimilation, water use efficiency, stomatal conductance, and in short, basically changes how much photosynthesis and how successful the photosynthesis is for each one of these trees. And beech leaf disease has been described as a carbon starvation disease. The symptoms don't progress throughout the year because all the damage is happening in those buds over the winter and in the spring. The symptom severity is the same all season except for leaf drop occurs when the leaves are severely affected. And you'll see that in some of the photos I have later on in the presentation of what this does to the beech trees. So the trees can reflush. They don't always. Just depends on how many leaves they've lost and what energy they still have. The other thing to keep in mind is that since this is a foliar disease and the nematodes are being shed, if those nematodes don't get back to a bud for the winter, then you can actually have like a bud that has infected leaves or disease leaves the first year, and then the next year doesn't have symptoms. But we'll talk about if that really happens. So I'm going to talk about our monitoring network. And the question of the monitoring network was, what is the impact of beech leaf disease in forests with and without beech bark disease? So in 2019, we wanted to know what was the rate of symptom development across the landscape, how much beech tree or sapling mortality was occurring, and how long it would take. And since beech bark disease wasn't ubiquitous across the landscape in southern Ontario, we also had questions about, will thickets develop in this part of southern Ontario, and how will the two diseases impact regeneration? So in ecoregion 7 in 2019, monitoring plots were set up at 17 locations. There's 2 plots per location. Forests had 1 or both diseases. 4 of them had beech bark disease. 5 of them had both diseases, and we had 7 that had just beech leaf disease. And in that plot network, all the trees and saplings are surveyed for dieback, disease, and scale. So it's not just the beech trees that are getting surveyed, it's also the maples and the ash and other trees. And there are seedling plots, sapling plots, and tree plots. All right. So what we've seen is that between 2019 and 2023, the expansion of beech leaf disease had occurred so rapidly that all the plots at all the locations had beech leaf disease. The top right figure is the probability of occurrence for beech leaf disease. And in 2019, we started out with under half of the trees having beech leaf disease. But by 2023, the probability that a tree would have beech leaf disease had increased to almost 100%. And now we just have 4 saplings left that don't have beech leaf disease. There is no sign that the disease goes away from the ecoregion 7 data. So we've had some unfavorable weather, we've had some cold winters, we've had some dry summers, and that hasn't changed that trend of increasing infections. And like I said, we're down to 4 saplings not having beech leaf disease. So it doesn't seem like there are trees in this study that are resistant to the disease. For scale, for the saplings, a lot of these saplings have scale, but it's not very much scale, and it changes year to year because scale can be washed off with rainwater, or it can be affected by cold. But the overall trend is that we're seeing more trees with more scale, more saplings with scale. Part of that is that the most western plots are part of an area where the scale insect hasn't been in that area for very long. And none of our saplings have beech bark disease, which is consistent with what's been seen in other areas. For the overstory trees, similar, by 2023, most trees had beech leaf disease. The scale insect, there's a lot more scale on the trees, which is also to be expected. And the probability that the trees have scale is much higher than it is for the saplings. And the bottom of the figure on the right is beech bark disease. So beech bark disease in ecoregion 7 has behaved differently than it has further north when you get onto the Canadian Shield. There's beech bark disease, all throughout that region, but it's progressed much more slowly. And you can see that the probability of a tree having beech bark disease in 2019 and 2025 has hardly changed. It's just a very slow increase. We also assess the percent of either the tree crown that has beech leaf disease, or the amount of the tree trunk that has scale insect, or the neonectaria cankers for beech bark disease. And the top of that figure is for beech leaf disease severity. The left is the overstory trees, and the saplings are on the right. And the trend is very similar, with every year increasing amount of the crowns being infected with beech leaf disease. Scale, it's more variable. Some of the trees have very large amounts of scale, other trees have very small amount scales. And the beech bark disease, again, for the overstory trees, it's slowly increasing, but pretty small change. And when you compare it to what's happening with beech leaf disease, it just seems extremely slow. So here's the photograph of some of the saplings being affected by beech leaf disease. You can see that they have those tiny little leaves. Some of those are reflush leaves. Some of them are severely affected leaves. And we are seeing mortality of especially the saplings from beech leaf disease, but it's taking, it takes many years of reinfection for mortality to occur. So Eric has run some analyses for us, and we're a tree that's only been affected for 2 years might have, around 2% risk of mortality. When they're infected for around 6 years, then that's increasing up to around 15%. We did observe that it's the smallest beech trees that are dying first. And again, like Madison mentioned this too, those little trees, they have, the least amount of resources stored to keep them going year after year. And we also are seeing in the plots that when both diseases are present, there is a little bit more mortality. One thought I have about that is that, when trees die of beech bark disease, they do break apart. And then when those parts of the tree come down, they're often crushing the saplings underneath them. So that's definitely, having an impact in our study. All right, and I put this slide in here to remind myself to talk about the difference between ecoregion 7 and these other areas farther north where beech leaf disease is just spreading to those areas, and how basically we can't assume that beech leaf disease will act in the same way as it has in ecoregion 7. There was a study reported from the Ohio State University by Selvey that identified some factors like temperature, relative humidity, proximity to water bodies, and how that played a role in determining if there was a risk of beech leaf disease developing in those areas. So next I'm going to talk about how the nematode is transmitted. And this is a joint project between the U.S. Forest Service and Ontario Ministry of Natural Resources. And we have specifically myself, Endurance, Danielle Martin, and Cameron McIntyre have been working on this. And we have another person on the grant is Mihail Cantor, but he's working on the wind and rain connection. So our questions for the study are insects, spiders, and mites vectors of the nematode? And if so, what time of year might that vectoring be occurring? And then also we had questions about if moving logs or branches of non-beech trees from the forest, could that result in the movement of the nematode? So we did look a little bit at bark, and we also collected insects from non-beech trees. So one of the first things we did a couple of years ago was do a caterpillar frass assay. So this involved collecting the caterpillars from foliage, placing them in a bag, collecting the frass that they left behind, and weighing it, and then soaking it. So that way we could view if nematodes were basically kind of swimming, moving around in the water under the microscope. And we did find that the caterpillars collected from Copeland Forest and Kirk Cousins Forest had live nematodes in them, as well as a lot of dead nematodes too. And the collections we made were coming from the banded tussock moth and the hickory tussock moths we were collecting in September and August. We also collected a lot of other arthropods, flies and beetles and true bugs, and we scanned them under the microscope looking for live nematodes. And when we found live nematodes, we did test to see if it was Leiolancus crenate. And then we also ground up these insects to see if there was association of the insects with the DNA of the nematode. So this part of the study is still going on. We're hoping to have it all wrapped up by the end of this coming year. And we did find that the nematode was frequently associated with the caterpillars, but less than 6% of other insects and spiders had an association with the nematode DNA. We found had more detections late summer and fall than early summer, which supports the idea that the nematodes moving around more in the end of the year of the growing season than early summer. It was curious that a lot of our detections of DNA were associated with a pale green assassin bug, which is a predator. So we're planning on looking a little more closely to see, is this assassin bug, is it, somehow feeding on nematodes, or is it feeding on other insects that are feeding on nematodes? Is not exactly clear why that association is occurring. We also did detect the nematode on the bark of non-beech trees and from insects from non-beech trees and saplings. So we plan to look a little more closely at that. I would stress that a lot of times we're looking at DNA, so we still need to look more closely and see if there's actual live nematodes associated with these insects. And we also, the transmission, they may be able to transmit the nematode, but that doesn't necessarily mean that new infections are occurring. So that's like another step in the research process that has to occur. This last photo I put in here because our collaborator Mihail, he did find evidence that the nematode is distributed by wind and rain. And so we don't have palm trees here in Ontario, but we do have these severe storms in our temperate forests. Like this is probably the explanation for the rapid spread of the symptoms across the landscape. So the work that we're doing with arthropods, our goal is to see, like, is there a potential for human-mediated transport, creating new pockets of beech leaf disease on the landscape far beyond the range of the disease as it is now. So in conclusion, we found that in Ontario, beech leaf disease is rapidly spreading. It causes widespread mortality of beech. The mortality only occurs after many years of infection. The beech abundance is declining, especially when both diseases are present. For the vectoring study, the nematode is likely transmitted in many ways, including wind, rain, insects. It could be transported on logs and branches, but we're still determining if these pathways result in new infections. And just overall, more information is needed to know if the nematode can survive farther north in Ontario and if the disease will be as severe. Now I can take questions.
Thank you very much, Sharon. We did have a question early on in your presentation from David Kerry, and it says, IAA analog question. So I'm hoping you know what that means.
I don't know.
No? Oh, okay. Dave, do you want to come on and clarify, please?
Oh, yeah. I was thinking about the mechanisms involved in how the salt wall thickening and disorganization happens. And it seems like it might be an IAA analog that the nematode or something associated with the nematode might be producing that's causing all the chaos there. But if nobody knows, that's totally fine too.
Great. Okay, thank you. Dave also had another comment about how any small healthy beech are exciting even when every other of its cohort is dead, even if it's n equals 4. So
So I would say I went back and looked at those four saplings that don't have beech leaf disease. Now in 2025, like one of them did have beech leaf disease previously. Another one barely has any leaves on it. So I've only got two two that really could give hope.
Okay, thanks for that update. Okay, any other questions? Please pop them into chat. Do you have one here? Sharon, what geographic areas are you most interested in investing time in for research for the future?
For the future.
Oh,
So I obviously I think the next question is ecoregion 6 and 5. As we move north, will the disease be as severe that far north? And like as we move inland away from Lake Huron and Lake Simcoe and Lake Ontario, will we see as much beech leaf disease developing?
another question. Do large beech that die of BLD still produce thickets?
So in ecoregion 7, like we haven't really been observing long enough to fully answer that question. However, the prevalence of beech leaf disease is so great that it seems like it would be unlikely that thickets would develop or even last long enough to outcompete the other species that are present. Um, I'm just thinking like we at Hawks Cliff, that is a spot where beech bark disease is has killed some trees. And good news for me was actually that there was some tulip poplar that was coming up in the plots, which was better than some places it's ash, which I'm assuming probably does not have a bright future. So I was really excited to see that tulip poplar, but I don't have enough data to really answer that question. But I think, in the next 5 years or so, that'll be something that we can decisively talk about.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so here's a question for Sharon and Eric. Do you have any plots with lingering beech post BBD and BLD? And if yes, do you have any insights on that?
So I'll defer to Eric because our beech bark disease is not far enough along in our plot network.
I have only seen one beech that I was hopeful is a lingering beech. We marked it and we're going back to that site in summer 27, so I'll get back to you. But as sort of Mike Brienesse discussed, like the rate of mortality for beech affected by beech bark disease, particularly on the shield, is very quick. In our sites in French Severn, we're up around 50% overstory mortality, and scale was detected in 2012, I think, in that plot. So we've gone from like detection of scale to 50% overstory mortality in the space of like 11 years. Our summer 23 was when we measured that site. So it proceeds very quickly. I have hope for a single beech that I have seen.
Thank you, Eric. Anyone else? Any other questions for Sharon? You're all digesting busily. That was a lot of information. Thank you. Okay, well, I will move on to our last presenter for today. And thank you again, Sharon, for sharing your research. I am very happy to introduce Hope Freeman, who is currently the acting chief park naturalist at Killbear Provincial Park. Hope is dedicated to connecting visitors with the natural world through meaningful education, stewardship, and community engagement. With experience leading discovery programs, coordinating ecological projects, and supporting interdisciplinary research, Hope is passionate about protecting species and habitats while inspiring others to care for Ontario's provincial parks. Over to you, Hope.
Thank you so much. And I apologize, I don't have a camera today, but you can look at my my nice photo of me with a rattlesnake. So thank you for that lovely introduction, and hello everyone. Thank you to the Forest Gene Conservation Association for inviting me to speak today. My name is Hope Freeman, and as introduced, I'm currently the acting chief park naturalist at Killbear Provincial Park. And before my time at Killbear, I worked at Grundy Lake Provincial Park, which has virtually no beech trees. So with that in mind, I do want to acknowledge that I'm relatively new to both beech bark disease and Killbear, having started at Killbear in mid-September after the retirement of longtime chief park naturalist Kenton Otterbein. Kenton spent nearly 30 years at Killbear and truly knows every tree, every rock, and every critter. But I'm still getting my footing and learning the nuances of this landscape. So if any questions come up that I can't answer today, I'll do my best to follow up afterwards. And many of these presentations that we've just heard from are very focused and quite specific. At Ontario Parks, as a chief park naturalist, we wear many hats, and have a lot of side of the desk work that we do. So please keep that in mind as I move through my presentation. So for those of you who have never been to Killbear or maybe just need a refresher, Killbear Provincial Park is one of the top 5 busiest parks in the Ontario park system, welcoming over 500,000 visitors annually. Killbear is a natural environment class park, which means it is designated to protect the area's significant natural and cultural resources. So through this designation, Killbear protects just over 17,000 hectares of land. As a peninsula on Georgian Bay, Killbear features iconic rocky shorelines and several sandy beaches paired with large, mature hardwood forests. And 3 of our campgrounds were historically located in mature beech forests, which became a significant liability issue very rapidly for the park due to the rapid decline of the large beech thanks to beech bark disease. So due to that liability, between 2012 and 2014, thousands of trees were removed throughout Killbear's campgrounds, roads, and trails. Crews began cutting in the fall of 2012, focusing on cutting and removing high-risk beech to ensure the campgrounds would be safe before reopening in the spring. So although Ontario Parks' mandate is to protect ecological integrity, we're also a business. Like I said, we welcome 50,000 or 500,000 visitors a year, so we want to make sure it's safe for them. To give a sense of scale, in one fall season alone, nearly 4,000 face cords of logs were cut, piled, and hauled out of campground areas. So really a lot of trees were removed. At the time of initial assessment, roughly half of Killbear's beech trees were anticipated to die as the beech bark disease passed through. And as a result, the park placed itself under voluntary quarantine. But as we know, even the fungus can become active again once the wood becomes moist. So it was kind of a difficult situation. But as the efforts ramped up to learn about beech bark disease, Killbear acted as a site for beech bark disease research by forest pathologists within the MNR. And although the park took extensive measures, the overall strategy was about reducing risks, supporting species diversity, and setting the park up for long-term forest resilience. So really, what are we seeing now? Safe to say that the 2012 to 2014 cutting program was substantial, and it did align with the forest health guidance at the time. The mature beech that remained in the campgrounds still show cankering, and unfortunately, visitor behavior complicates this further. As we all know, beech bark is unfortunately a very inviting canvas, so we do have those impacts as well, that maybe some areas that are more remote or don't see as many visitors may not be impacted by. In terms of regeneration, we do continue to see dense beech understory dominating in many areas, especially along roadsides and locations that underwent heavy cutting. So within campgrounds, we actually see less regenerations in some places, and that's not because the conditions aren't suitable, but because of informal social trails. So these are trails that visitors create by repeated trampling. So you can imagine paths from a campsite to a bathroom as opposed to taking the park road. They'll cut through their campsite to water taps, to beaches, etc. We do hypothesize that road regeneration trends tend to be stronger because we have a designated recreation trail that runs the full length of the park. So that really does limit the kind of trampling that we see within our campgrounds. But due to these really big thickets of these smaller beech trees along our roadsides, it does raise questions about competitive pressures. So we're thinking about non-beech species such as oak, maple, and birch and hemlock, and how they're going to struggle to establish under these conditions. And this is important because one of our mandates within Ontario Parks is also education. So we have this big, beautiful maple grove. Killbear used to have this amazing maple syrup festival, but due to beech bark disease and beech snap, the area became unsuitable and unsafe for visitors to go into. And our maple syrup festival kind of fizzled out. So these are questions that we're raising from an education perspective and a visitor management perspective of how can we make these areas safe for visitors to go through, but also to help maybe reestablish some other species. So moving forward, because Killbear is an active campground, hazard tree work is constant and it is not limited to our friend the beech tree. So I know some people mention ash trees. I could also do a whole presentation on emerald ash borer here at Killbear, and unfortunately, we've been hit hard by that as well, which cutting took place for that as well. But we can conduct ongoing monitoring and frequently remove newly compromised trees near high-use areas. Balancing ecological integrity with public safety is one of our biggest ongoing challenges. And of course, as I'm sure many of you know, just capacity as well. Like I said, we wear many hats and we work with our park management team and our maintenance team to try and do the best we can do for ecological integrity, but also park safety. So I kind of alluded that we do have education programs. So here at Killbear, we have a beautiful Discovery Center. If you've never been, I invite you to come. If you do come or you're a regular Killbear visitor, please come and say hello. We offer education videos within the center to inform visitors of beech bark disease, its signs and symptoms. And we actually have a video that specifically talks about the work that was done at Killbear from 2012 to 2014. And what's interesting is Killbear has a lot of visitors who return year after year. So some have been camping here since the park opened in the 60s or early 50s, or yeah, I guess late 50s. But so they too have watched the effects of beech bark take place. So with that in mind, we really have the opportunity to leverage visitor engagement through photo monitoring stations to help show how the landscape has changed in specific spots over time. So yeah, it's really helpful because when you're only one team, if you have 500,000 visitors in your park every year, you can get a lot of data from them. On a positive note, in addition to our army of campers, we do have seen some individuals large mature individuals who do seem healthy despite beech bark disease moving through. We still see trees that have beech bark disease that maybe didn't a couple of years ago, but the occasional mature beech that remains scale-free or is only minimally affected is really encouraging. And some of these trees maintain healthy crowns despite what's occurred around them, so that's exciting. Especially because these individuals can hold long-term ecological value to our park and may become central to future restoration or regeneration strategies within our park. We also have close relationships with our local Indigenous communities. So We have one that's right across the water from us, so this is where we kind of share information with them and what they've seen in terms of the beech bark change or the beech trees changing. So that said, overall, mature beech at Killbear are definitely not close to rebounding as beech bark disease persists across the region, but there is still some signs of hope. So to wrap up, Killbear's experience reflects the wider provincial trend. Cutting can manage immediate hazards and temporarily shape regeneration, but long-term forest structure remains heavily influenced by beech bark disease dynamics. And Killbear's story is one of early intervention, strong management action, and ongoing ecological learning. And even with intensive work, beech bark disease does continue to shape the park at multiple scales. And it seems just as many of you are seeing in your own regions across Ontario. So with that, I'd like to say thank you very much. Like I said, I'm still gaining my footing at Killbear, and I'm still learning all about beech trees and beech bark and what it means for our park. But I'm happy to take any questions anybody may have at the time.
Thank you so much, Hope. Yeah, we do have a few questions coming through. The first one is, does the park have strong support in forest management and forest management planning?
Oh, that's a good question. So for those who are unfamiliar with Ontario parks, we wear many hats within our zone. We have so I'll give an example. So Killbear falls within the Northeast zone. So that goes from Killbear all the way up to James Bay. And then it also goes a little bit to the east and a little bit to the west. So it's a huge land area. And we have people like myself within the parks, but we also have a team of zone ecologists, around 3 to 4. But that's not that many people for all that land that we protect. So in terms of within our organization, the answer is no, but that's where we lean on our research partners and our other organizations that can help us out where needed. And that's kind of where partnerships came into play in events like these here. So a partnership, like I said, with the MNR and how we acted as a research site for them.
Thank you. A couple other questions which might be a bit linked. There's a question about what was done with the large volume of trees harvested in the park, and sort of the companion question to that is there any risk to using the wood, or is it just best left to rot?
Okay, yeah, those are good questions. So basically what happened was all the trees were cut and then put into one area. And you can still go and see the area to this day where they were cut. Again, this was 2012 to 2014. So some of them had decayed and broken down and whatnot through natural processes. And we kind of have a tree graveyard where our beech trees have gone and our ash trees have gone. So that's kind of just a spot out of the way that visitors can't see. We did discuss the potential for mulching and chipping to use as landscaping throughout the park, but as the fungus can regenerate when the wood gets moist, we didn't want to use it throughout the park to further the spread. So kind of contained it in a specific region, but I don't know. It's kind of a double-edged sword what you can do with it there. Hope that answered the questions.
Yeah, that was great. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you.
Any final questions for Hope? And I'm just going to open it up back again for all of our speakers. Now that you've seen everyone present their perspectives and information and experiences, I'm just like to open the floor up to any final questions that might have come up as you listen to the subsequent presenters, make some connections maybe. Just now's your opportunity, so feel free to pop it into the chat. Okay, well, you certainly know who to contact if you do have questions following up. So you can either contact FGCA directly or definitely get in touch with the presenters individually. Oh, okay. We do have one. The question is, are there obvious signs of BLD we can see before the buds open? So I'm going to hand that off to Sharon or Madison.
Hey there.
Hi.
I don't know of any symptoms before the buds open.
Okay. All right. Good. Well, not good, but you just have to wait. It's a waiting game. Yeah. Okay. Well, I wanted to express my sincere thanks to everyone for joining us today, especially our presenters. We really appreciate the time that you took to connect with us and share all your valuable insights and experiences. And everyone that joined us, thank you so much for making the time. We hope you enjoyed it and learned some new information and hopefully made some connections with other people that are, looking at the same things that you are and trying to do the same work. So at this point, just a reminder, we are recording this webinar and we will make it available at a later date. So definitely please stay tuned for that. And I would also like to take the opportunity, if you haven't had a chance yet, to please check out our next webinar, which is happening on Wednesday, March the 11th. And I put the registration link into the chat. So hopefully you can make some time to join us then. We will be looking at sort of the conservation opportunity side of beech bark and beech leaf disease impacts. So there'll be a whole roster of different speakers joining us, and we certainly hope that you can as well. And I think that is it for us. We'll say goodbye for now, and definitely keep in touch if you're interested in keeping the conversation going about beech diseases. Thank you, everyone.